All right, everyone. Welcome to the Serious Writer Club on October the 11th, Wednesday, with our guest, Lauren Mestitz. Is I said that right? Yeah.
You did.
Hope so. All right. Thanks, Bethany, for filling me in on it. We're so glad that you're here, Lauren, with us. Lauren is an accountability coach. And as we get into this novel writing season of NaNoWriMo in November and all the things that are coming up as we look to get submissions out, get manuscripts done, this is a great concept to talk about is how do I have proper accountability to finish my books, finish my manuscripts, finish my proposals, and then get them out, and then have accountability to make sure I follow through on my submissions and continue to grow in my career. I think that's one big one, Lauren, that we get so focused on having accountability to finish a book. There's so many more parts of the writing process that people have to do now. They have to do social media, they have to do marketing, they have to do a promotion, they have to do publicity, and then they also have to learn to develop their skills at a higher level. It's all of that requires accountability. So I'm excited to hear what you have to share, and then really talk about how we can help apply this to writers in their writing journey and be able to help them to do the best, to be the best, and to get the most done. So thanks for being here.
Absolutely. I am so excited to be here. Thanks to both of you.
Yeah. And thank you to my Aunt Hebe for introducing us, because you guys have been working together, and Hebe has got a very distinguished career like within corporate America, and also then as a writer too. And when she said Lauren is the best at helping with get things done, we're like, okay, let's talk about how we could do this for writers. So I'm going to do just a little brief intro for you, Lauren, and then we're going to jump into the 3 best practices, which is this kind of fun series that we're doing right now. But so for those of you watching, Lauren has a decade of experience leading corporate teams. So maybe not so much writers, but definitely people in the business world. You've got a degree from Northwestern University, Kellogg, with an MBA, which is so impressive. And you partner with coaching clients to help them define and achieve specific personal and professional goals, which is fantastic. And then you also design personalized accountability systems with your clients. I'm excited about that. And teach them how to overcome obstacles and reach their objectives. So like, we're thrilled to have the business experience coming in on the writing side, because there is a business side of writing. And it doesn't get talked about, I think, as much. I think people get thrown into it, Kyle, as soon as like I'm dealing with some of my clients now who, they were in the querying trenches, and now they have an agent, and now we're on this business side, and it's completely different, and it's not talked about enough. So I'm really excited. So Lauren, I'm going to turn this over to you, because you've got probably a million, but at least 3 top best practices for writers with accountability. So why don't you start us off with the first one?
Wonderful. Right before I share that, I'll just preface these steps by saying that if it was simple and easy, we would have done it already, right? That's the foundation of accountability, is recognizing that it's okay to need these kinds of systems and structures, because if it was easy, we would have done it. And so one of the best ways to move forward on these things is to make sure that we're giving ourselves the grace and the space to say, I do need a system, because this is challenging. What I'm doing is hard. It's new. It can be frustrating and a bit overwhelming. And so these investments in these steps are things that really help us move forward. And so we leave everything at the door right now in this webinar and this podcast to say, if we haven't done it already, that's okay. That's excellent, actually. We're just going to move forward from here.
That's good to know. I always feel like you're never caught up. That's how this life is. Like, you're never caught up with queries, with contracts, with books, with writing, deadlines. It never ends.
Right. We all want to have figured it all out yesterday, but here we are, and we've got some steps that'll help us move forward and make tangible progress on those challenging and sometimes overwhelming goals. So the first step, best practice for accountability, is to clearly define those goals. If we're hazy on knowing where we're trying to go, we often have a really hard time knowing whether we've gotten there or not, and if we're taking the right steps in the right direction. So you imagine like heading off on like a hike or a walk, and it's like, well, if you don't know where you're actually trying to end up, how do you know if you get there?
Yeah, I will never get there because I'm so directionally challenged.
Right.
I have like I have the printout just in case the GPS goes out on the phone, because I will not be able to find my way back.
Right. And then that's a system. That's a system right there, right? Is the idea of saying, I have figured out something in my environment that's going to help me. And so when you clearly define those goals, you want them to be specific and you want them to be measurable. And the piece that I often work with coaching clients on is this additional element of goal setting, which is really aligning those goals to your values and your aspirations. So we can all print off a checklist that somebody else has created and say, this is what we need to do. But if it's not our steps, we rarely feel motivated and connected to them to want to take those next steps. So one of the pieces within this goal setting is defining that why it is important to you. And that can add a little bit of the spark and the kind of skin in the game element of a step. So for example, I know one of the pain points on writing is the social media and marketing piece of it. And so an example there, which can be intimidating or confusing, is being able to reframe that goal of saying, and I have to do some kind of social stuff because somebody tells me I have to.
Yep, that is exactly what I hear. We're at like 15-minute appointments. It's like, I don't want to do this piece. I just want my mom, who is a teacher on here, she'll say, I don't want to do any of that marketing. I just want to sit down and write.
Like, right. And so then reframing that, one way to reframe that goal is to say specifically and measurably, okay, this month, I will post 3 times a week on whatever platform is the right one for you, because my book is worth sharing with others.
Oh, I like that.
That's good.
Like that last piece of that.
And that really frames goals in why is it important to you? And it really helps make it feel like it's something that's worth overcoming that intimidation or that anxiety, or perhaps scheduling in the time to do it. So that's the first, that clearly defining your goals.
Love that. And I think the affirmation of that is important, because there's so many writers who maybe they don't have a good support system at home, or they're not in they don't have a support group or critique group that's cheering them on, and they really feel like they're very much alone on this journey. And it's already lonely in its nature, just writing. So I like that there's that piece of it where you can say, because my book is worth sharing. I think that's something we should all be writing down like near our laptop, is that the story is worth sharing, the book is worth sharing, the message matters.
Well, Bethany, how many times have you had somebody say that they don't really want to share their book because they're not really passionate about it? I mean, I've heard that before. Well, I don't really think anybody want to read this. Well, there's not a value to it, because if you feel like it's important, then everybody needs to read it. Everybody needs to have that information. Everybody needs to engage with it. And so I think that's an important concept for people to understand. Like, and that goes to for writers, the need to create what you're creating. Like if it's connected to you, right? I think you said connected to your values, then there's a reason why you're writing this, whether it's fiction, children's, or nonfiction. There's a reason why you think this needs to exist and for others to read it. And then it's more, you're going to want to talk about it in social media. You're going to want to write it in blog posts. You're going to want to tell people about it. And if you don't, maybe it's not really, the why is not really there. So I think it's good.
Or we've buried the why, Kyle, building on what you said, under all the anxieties of having to learn a bunch of new stuff. So, sort of uncovering that is also something that I work with my clients on, and saying, we had a why, we had a spark, we had that passion. And then, without zooming out, sometimes we lose that connection to it.
That's so good too, because particularly with nonfiction, I think this is super important, because the platform is just so much has to be there. But, when you're going and looking at someone's social media, if they're not talking about the topic in their book, it's just like Kyle said, like, where's the passion? Because that would be leaking out into everything that's being done, and it could take time, but you kind of expect to see that I actually just had an editor at a kind of a big house say that when for children's books, when he was looking, it wasn't he was looking to see the passion, the why behind why that story had to be written and why it had to get out there. And that wasn't nonfiction, that was picture books. And so, it was great to hear that. So I love all of this is so perfect. All right. So number 1 in our 3 best practices is clearly define your goals.
Yep.
And then number 2,
develop a personalized plan. So this is where we get really specific for ourselves. We write ourselves those directions that when we're maybe not feeling it quite as much, then we say, oh, I've got my directions already read. Past Lauren took care of me. Past Lauren made a plan for me. And now I can just follow that plan. And so you want to outline those measurable tasks with some timelines. And most critically, again, this is identifying the details, the specific time frame, for example, that you're going to write, or the processes you're going to use to complete your task. So for example, if you're saying, I just cannot find time to write, you go, well, there's 24 hours in that day. And there are absolutely things we can't control about that time that we say, this is what I need to do. And there's also many hours where we make choices. And so it's like, do we make a choice to brush our teeth like in the morning? It's like, yeah, actually, but we always find time to do it, right? And so when you make something a habit or you schedule that time in, that's a really good example of something that you say, okay, I'm not just going to say, I'm going to write my book this month, right? You say, okay, I am going to write for an hour. I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to stay on this, couch or in this chair, and I'm going to write for an hour. Whatever happens is perfect. It's exactly what needs to happen, but I'm going to go ahead and write. Or you're going to say, I'm going to write 5 pages. Whatever's on those pages doesn't matter, but you've set yourself that measurable goal that when you don't feel like it, you say, well, I'm going to sit in front of this computer or this notepad or whatever for an hour, and I've scheduled that time in.
There's I've been watching some I'm like obsessed with the planner world, and so I was getting kind of into like productivity, like binging this YouTube channel, and she has this thing she puts on her desk where it's like this timer where she can set it for like different things, and like once that goes off, she moves to the next task. And she was saying, if she's editing a video for YouTube and it's not done, but she's only got 5 minutes left, she goes, I have to make a decision. So she really keeps herself to, like, I would have stretched it out. I'm like, I'm not done, and push everything else off. And she was saying, I have to make a choice. Either I finish up what had to get done, or this is as is, like, because I wasted too much time. And I was like, okay, that's a different mindset where you're actually sticking to that time that you limited yourself to. Because I'll just stretch it. I'll push everything else off, and then I get stressed.
Mm-hmm. And maybe 1 hour, maybe folks are like, whoa, that is way too much. I don't have that. Okay. 10 minutes. Start there. But the important thing is starting that practice of saying 10 minutes. And then when the timer goes off, you do stop. And if you have the flexibility, maybe you keep going because you feel like it. You've built in that joy of that experience again. And so that's that personalized plan where you really think about your context and you say, okay, when am I most likely to do this? When am I willing to reschedule something or able? When can I actually put it in my calendar and say, this is where I'm writing? Just like you would have a doctor's appointment or, a kid's soccer game or something. You say, where do I actually schedule this in as something I am going to do during this time period?
I think that's so good. One thing that helped a lot was when I started looking at the week, like the to-do list, like this stuff has to get done this week. And then going into, okay, what today has to get done in order to make that. Cause I was so focused on the daily tasks that I always felt like, oh, I didn't get, my to-do list done today. Like you feel like if it's failure, like this, we put it on ourselves. But when I started looking at like the week as a whole, and Kyle, even with our serious writer stuff, like we would try to meet, but like the schedules are always changing. And finally, it was probably last year, a couple years ago, Kyle was like, look, Wednesdays, let's just do Wednesdays.
Let's just set it aside.
We both had. And so it's like, okay, so it's freeing when you can block out time like that, Lauren, like you're saying, because then it's like, okay, I know I have to do the serious writer thing. I want to either do it Friday or Wednesday after our call, or I want to do it before so I can talk to Kyle about it. So it kind of builds in this accountability, like you said, like I know I'm going to meet with them. These are the things that we're going to talk about, or I can push this off till Wednesday when we're together and we can do it then. So that's been very helpful. And Kyle, I think probably for you too, because you've got 600 things that you've got going on.
You just set. So I like it. Set time. I like the time period thing. Set a time period it needs to be done by. I think that's where people say they're going to do stuff, but they don't set a time period to have it done. So it's like, I'm going to get up every day and write, and then but they don't have a time period. They don't know how long they're going to do that for, and then they just it kind of falls apart.
Right, because there's too many decisions to make in the moment when there are distractions and obstacles. And so if we can make all the decisions for ourselves already, then we just go and we follow that recipe, or we follow those like the Google Map instructions of saying, well, you turn left here because this is what you do. And so, okay, I get up and I sit down and I open my laptop, or I sit at my computer or my notebook, and this is what I do for 15 minutes. It's not going to be too painful. And you start getting that consistency.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It becomes part of the routine then.
Yes.
All right. So to recap, for our 3 best practices, clearly define your goals is number 1. Number 2, develop a personalized plan. That's so important. We could do like a whole 5 hours on just that. And then, okay, so take us to number 3.
Okay, number 3 is regularly reflecting, adjusting, and reviewing your progress.
Analytics.
Yes, and if the idea of analytics feels too technical or like a little further from our experience, it's about getting curious and saying, I'm going to approach my process with curiosity. And so inevitably, things don't always go directly toward plans. They don't follow plans, right? Something gets in the way. And so this 3rd step is about not viewing that as failure and throwing the whole system out the window and saying, I guess I won't write a book then. But say, okay, I'm curious about what happened there. Let's define what happened, and let's figure out how to tweak the system to account for maybe a new commitment or a new constraint that's popped up since the plan was first made. And so this step really lets us both acknowledge what we have done and celebrate that, as well as recognize we have to be flexible, and we just tweak that plan so that those instructions are ready for us in our future selves, the ones that do have an additional, perhaps something about the seasons, right? Our responsibilities as humans sometimes change with the seasons. And so what does winter look like versus what does summer look like? And making sure that we're adapting those plans so that we continue to make progress forward without feeling judgmental about ourselves, but instead feeling curious and giving ourselves grace.
Oh, I like that. Well, we talk about that a lot. Grace upon grace upon grace. Like in any relationship, like work relationship, family relationship, friends, like something that Kyle actually, he said very early on when we started working together, with our group, is, he was saying, if we're always assuming or giving grace to the other person and assuming the best from them, then it takes that anger away. Like if something doesn't happen, but instead of being upset about it, it's like, okay, something probably happened, and always kind of defaulting to that gracefulness mode. Like you really don't have a lot of rising tension because usually something did happen, and so then you're not like firing off these kind of like angry emails or texts. And so that's something that I've tried to incorporate in my own life, just from, part of on the business side too. And my favorite term is permaflex, permanently flexible. I always say like almost everything on the calendar can be moved. Permaflex. I would put it on a shirt. Although it sounds like Velcro or something, so it doesn't really work. Permaflex.
Yes, it's just so important to not be rigid.
Yes, and pivot. It's another good P word. Mm-hmm. You got to be willing.
Yeah, pivot when we need to, and we think through realistic obstacles when we make our plan. That's step 2. But then there's going to be unexpected obstacles that come up, and that's where that step 3 is really incorporating new information that we have.
in the book Essentialism, which is probably in my top 5 nonfiction like productivity leadership books, he talks about doing like a quarterly review. And so when he was really getting into the business and really starting with that, I think that was on the business side, but he said he would get a hotel for like 2 nights, and like it was blocked off on the calendar, and that was when he would go through everything that needed to be reviewed, all the things that you're talking about right here, what needs to be adjusted, and then making the plan for the next quarter, however far out he was going. And that became something that he did every single time, and he was reflecting on that and saying that kind of changed things because he was able to move in the moment. Like, there was enough time. 90 days is a great time period for anyone who's doing like social media and like it doesn't feel like it's working and it's only been 2 days. Like, that's me. Like, nobody liked it. It did not get the views. Like, you have to give it time. So the review aspect and then moving on is so important. And I think that number 3 part is, we hear so much about goals, like the first 2 parts, but that third part is so crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something that that we can really make progress on without, because we just don't know what exactly will come up until we explore with it and kind of play too. So for example, trying to set aside time for writing, let's say, and saying, okay, well, I think I'm going to do this like right after lunch. That's going to be my time. And then you try that for a couple days, and maybe the first day you do it, second day you blew right past it, third day you do a little bit, fourth day you kind of feel like you don't want to anymore, and then taking that moment going, okay, wait, is this the right time of day for me? Maybe I should take what I've done, say, okay, I did it at first, seemed like there was some momentum, maybe I should try another time of day. And so being able to be playful and exploratory with that until you really find something that feels good, so that you'll want to continue. Not every day, right? But like at least half the days you'll say, I'm excited about getting to do this. And I know the history and the consistency I have done this so far.
I love that. And Kyle, you set the scene when you're doing like your binge writing. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is basically the process I use for something called binge writing, which you just write a lot of words in a very short amount of time. And so very similar. What's the goal? How far do you want to get? What's the personalized plan? For me, I would write all weekend, and I would set up that meals were taken care of. Like, my wife would help. She would make meals all weekend. So I would just write, and like, she would just come into the computer and just say, here's dinner, here's lunch. And it was very helpful because she was part of this journey with me. And so was excited about it. And then I would get a lot done because I had set the goal. I had made a plan. I had a time period I would do, a weekend, and I wouldn't write again for a couple of weeks. So we set aside a specific time for that, and then I'd do it again, and so I would do about once a month. I would just binge for a couple of days and write. And it really worked out well for me to finish my novel, because I had the same problems as everybody else. I was struggling to get the novel done. And so I needed a better plan. And then, that doesn't really work for me right now because my kids are older. So taking an entire weekend to do that, I've reflected and reviewed, and that doesn't work anymore. So I have to find a better way.
I love that example, Kyle, because it fit your life at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was, involved some choices that you and your wife were willing to make together. And also it was once every few weeks, which kind of breaks us out of that mindset of saying it's every day or never.
Right. Yeah.
No, consistency doesn't have to mean every day. It has to mean what works for you, what is reasonable. And often something I find myself doing is that I set way too ambitious goals for myself. When I start planning, I'm like off to the races, and my goals are a little too far out of reach.
Mm-hmm.
And so often I find it useful to kind of say what's an initial commitment I want to make to myself, and then scale it back 1 or 2 clicks and make it incredibly reasonable, because that then is more consistently going to give me the confidence to say, I can do this. I have done this. And so that idea of saying, I'm going to write for 5 minutes. It's like, well, I don't know. Is that going to do something? It actually does do something for your confidence. Right. It means, you know what, I have the commitment to myself and my craft that I am going to sit down and make these 5 minutes. And then eventually maybe it'll be 10, 15, 20, 30.
I love that. As we're kind of wrapping up, any final thoughts like on the accountability aspect of this? Because that really is kind of the crux of your coaching and
Yes.
what you work with the businesses and the clients is on that particular point. So any like final thoughts on that?
Yes. So I wanted to bring points to this conversation that can be self-accountable,
Great.
where you start to build in those consistencies to yourself, and to your values. However, accountability often works much better if you do bring others into the process, be it a writer's group, be it a coach, be it somebody that you actually are committing to. Because the act of committing out loud to another person really socially bonds us together, and gives us a motivation outside of ourselves to want to be able to talk about that progress. And so when you want more successful accountability with more consistency, that's when you do want to bring in other people. And they can help you. And I know Bethany is going to send out some questions after this webinar. With interest, if folks want to build some accountability systems and really enact these steps with in community with a coach, with myself, or with others, and that can really add a lot of efficacy to the steps. So it's easy to kind of look at these 3 steps, but it's hard to implement. And we are not alone. We do not have to be alone. We really do our best work in community with others.
It's so true. Like that's one thing we love about, our club members and our Serious Writer family members is the support that everyone gives each other. And it seems like different social media platforms, there's different writer groups that do well, like, in different pockets of it too, but it's super important. Like I remember when I went to my first conference and my mom was like, "Oh, you'll make friends." And I was like, "I don't want to make friends. I'm super introverted and I'm okay." But looking back, that we're 11 years out now, like my best friends are, and pretty much all my friends are now from the writing community. And to be able to say like, this is what's going on and have them understand exactly what that means in this industry has been probably one of the best things, of my life that I treasure so much. So I'm very passionate about making sure that people feel included, and we want to make sure that, writers, if you're looking for groups, like we've got lots of resources to be able, to give you to find your people.
Yes. And in fact, there's some data to back up exactly what your experience is, that shows, just one example is that the American Society of Training and Development did a study about accountability and found that you have a 65% chance of completing a goal if you commit to someone. And,
Nice.
Kyle, as you were saying, and that if you commit to someone, that makes a huge difference, where you said you got 30% of the pitches that people said, "Oh, I'm going to send this to you." And so even that, 65%, if you commit to a goal, you're more likely to complete that. And then on top of that, if you have specific accountability appointments with a person that you've committed to, that success rate increases to 95%.
Wow.
Really?
95% success of completing that goal. And so that is the importance of having that accountability partnership with a coach, with a writer's group, where you have specific accountability. And so if we had unlimited time, we could talk more about specific tools to really leverage that accountability time, and how to kind of report back and share and motivate when maybe you're not feeling it that day. But yes, it has huge impacts.
Oh, that's a fantastic success rate. I mean, even when we were doing like marketing stuff, Kyle, with the landing pages, remember the guy was, he's built these landing pages for these billion-dollar companies. And he was saying, well, it's a very small percent who's ever going to click over to the landing page. And out of those people, 1.5% are actually going to take your offer.
Right.
I think I died in that meeting. I was just like, 1.5%?
So few.
So tiny. So that's a great success rate. Okay, it's been amazing having you here. And for Serious Club patrons who are here with us live, we've got a Q&A session following this. So stay tuned And then for those of you watching, we will have links to all kinds of resources for you in the caption description, everywhere that this is posted. So Kyle, any last thoughts? I'll let you close it out.
No, this was great. I love accountability. I push for it all the time for people. I think people would get a lot more done if they had proper accountability with their spouse, their writing critique partners, their friends, their boss, their employees. I think accountability is such an important thing. Although I think we as Americans don't really like accountability in general. So I think that's the opposite of freedom for some people, is having accountability. But yeah, I think it's so important to get these things done. So thanks, Lauren, for sharing all this with us. Yeah, so I think it'll be very helpful.
Absolutely. So happy to be here.